Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
morning.
What we're talking about is problem solving through the arts, case study and social solutions. What we really want to focus on is what works. You know, now, Pamela, I love your story of what happened and how you went from essentially being an artist, following your own heart, to seeing how you were driving social change in favelas and the issue of violence against women. Can you tell people a little bit about what worked there?
Yeah. I have my personal artwork that's like the murals that talk about gender and violence, but it's more subjective. And a point I saw that we need to develop something more direct that make an effective change. And I developed this methodology of 3 hours workshop where we go to the communities, to the schools, and use the graffiti to promote the women's rights, especially the law that we have in Brazil against domestic violence. And because sometimes you go to the favela and you say, oh, let's talk about domestic violence, no one's coming. And if we go and say to the people, okay, let's make a graffiti, people see that's a good idea and people just come and you have that space, that moment to talk with people about the law that's super important to protect women.
Well, that's interesting, and it relates a little bit to what you've done in your own life in the sense of finding the vernacular that works, finding the language that works. In your case, you found the language through humor and a way to connect to people. And I'm wondering if you see that as kind of the first step in finding a social solution through the arts is cracking the code of the community that you're in.
Well, speaking about arts, satire is known to be an offending art. It's an art that offends people. It is one of the most coveted arts and yet the most scrutinized and sometimes the least likable, depends on which side of the joke you are. Usually if you're on that side, on the side of the offended, you really hate satire. However, satire helps to challenge taboos. It encourages people to think outside the box. It takes them outside of their comfort zone. And this is why it's not likable by people in authority, people in media, people who are not used to have their authority or their views challenged. What satire does, and humor in general, it brings more people to the table to discuss issues and subjects that they might not otherwise discuss it because they are too dull or they are too complicated. If you want to discuss a funding problem or a parliament resolution, it might be too complicated to listen to CNN for hours. But a couple of jokes, a sketch can actually bring it more home. So it makes it more easy to people to follow, to engage. A lot of people put a lot of pressure on satirists and comedians. I mean, many of the satirists have been elevated to much higher statuses, like people get more news from satirists and humorists more than news, or they look at them as activists or freedom fighters. I don't think that should be the case, because the role of a satirist stops at the edge of a theater, it stops at the edge of a screen. At the end of the day, it's up to the people to change. Satire don't change people. Satire don't change things. It might help for people to change, and then people are the ones who actually take it in their own hands to change.
Well, some of us actually live in countries where the news has become satire, which is making jobs very difficult for satirists. But, Vishaka, that wasn't a political commentary. That was just me talking about the weather. But I guess in both of these things, I want to get to a concept that may seem a little bit highbrow, but I think it's really important here. In the beginning part of the 20th century, when Impressionist art came out, critics would view it, and they would see a few lines on a page where once they saw reality. And when they saw a few lines on the page, they recognized that there was a collaboration taking place between the artist and the audience. And in fact, they came up with a term called the beholder's share. And it essentially said that an artist only does half the work. The rest of the work is done inside the mind of the audience. And when I was in the Clinton administration, Bill Clinton had a term for this, which he called the meta message. He said he would give a speech from the words on the page, but that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was how that landed on the ears of the listener. And both Panmela and Bassem have found ways to speak in the language of the listener, but a lot of art doesn't. And you've got this great background both from running the Asia Society, but also museums and so forth. Do you see that as a problem that needs to be prioritized?
Well, I think first of all, I should just mention that this idea that what is an aesthetic experience? In India, it goes all the way back to 5th century AD. It's called rasa. And rasa is exactly that. It's the idea that you, the artist, are there, but the audience is the other half that creates the aesthetic experience. So just to be clear, Impressionists were not the first ones. No, what can I tell you? Just to be on the safe side. The second thing is, I think, what Pamela and Wasim both said, and I think the important thing to me is that what art does is to create a space. Art does many things. And one of the things that I was just looking around, all the quotes you've used, one of the best quotes is from Einstein, who says, logic will get you from A to B. Creativity will take you everywhere. And it's that space in which other things happen. So I think we have to be very clear when we say art solves problems, and it's exactly what you said, that it's not so much that art solves problems. Art creates other parts of your brain to function. And we know from neurologists now and neuroscience that creativity resides in different parts of our brain than logic. It is that creative intelligence that creates a space. Why is it that people come to create graffiti?
In my case, it's a tool.
Exactly, it's a tool. And what we need is artists to be at the table. We need arts to be at the table to create the ecology of social problems, but not to really create a false advertising that art solves problems, but it gets too instrumentalist for me. And I think we need to really be clear that art does amazing things. I mean, for example, all you have to go is to the Guggenheim show and see Anish Kapoor, Red Homeland. It stops you. It's like Sandeep Das or any music that we heard here. It stops you in your tracks. It changes other parts of your mind to really pay attention, and it does something to your heart.
Well, I think it actually it literally may change parts of your mind, right? I think it literally changes your brain chemistry. It changes your brain chemistry when you laugh.
Yeah, well, they say people who cannot take satire are a little bit stupid.
Satirists say that.
The thing is, it does change. It does all kinds of things. But like for me, satire is important to stand against fear. Authoritarian leaders, or even in democratic countries, leaders with authoritarian tendencies get very offended by satire. That's why you find a certain president will go into a rage of tweets whenever somebody is making fun of him in a comedy show.
I don't know who you're referring to, but just keep going.
I mean,
right.
He's orange. But the thing is, well, the problem is that, and the reason this is it, and this is why they hate satire and they hate satirists, is that those leaders, they need this fake respect and they need to be feared. When you laugh at someone, you're not afraid anymore, and they hate that. And they unleash their anger at satirists and comedians. They call you a fool. They call you a clown. They call you a joke. But in the process, they're the one who's turning into a clown. They're the one who's turning into a joke, and they're the one making fools out of themselves.
I have a theory of life, by the way. We do this, we become very familiar with each other, so I'll share with you my philosophy of life a little bit. One of my philosophies of life is there are two kinds of people. There are people who get the joke, and there are people who don't get the joke. And life is too short to spend much time with the people who don't get the joke, right? But Penmela, following up on the comment, how did you know you were gaining traction? What was it that said to you, oh, I should do more of this? How did you as an artist, have the light bulb go off over your head to say this is working?
When I was 24 years old, I suffered domestic violence, and when I saw the law that was new, because before the women were beaten and nothing happens, and when I saw that now we have a law to protect women, I saw that it was super important to divulgate this law. And
In Brazil, until 15 years ago or so,
Yeah.
it was actually legal for a man to kill his wife
it's not,
in a heat of passion moment.
Yeah.
In other words, the laws were sort of biased very much towards the man, right?
yeah. Lots of people think that Brazil is super free country, that women are free there, but it's not true because the culture is the prison. The way people see you is the biggest prison in Brazil, you know? It's not so free as people think. You can see that it's 5 minutes a woman is beaten in Brazil. And it's 90 minutes a woman is killed because it's just the fact that it's woman, like femicide. And I saw that. I don't want that the girls grow up to be being victims and the boys grow up being aggressors. And I could make some difference, and I have to use the tool that I have in that moment. The tool that I have was the graffiti. And I started dedicating myself to make a change because I believe that people can change.
The art is a tool, as you said, but sometimes artists are more than that. And I've seen examples of it. In Afghanistan, a girl made a song about child brides. And it changed the way millions of people downloaded it. It changed the views. You going to talk about some other examples?
Actually, I was just going to say that in India also there is a huge movement in crafts for village crafts, and this is in eastern India where men were going off and getting HIV/AIDS, and women started making quilts, coming together and telling the stories that they were experiencing, and all of a sudden, within 6 months to a year, they began to feel that they were empowered to tell that story. And as they told that story, men were getting more and more upset. But ultimately, it did help change the law. So I think what we have to recognize is that art does create a space, and it does create some sense of empowerment, which then can lead to something. So it's sort of not like you started out making quilts because you wanted to change the law, but things happen and they work with other social workers and everybody else to actually create the law that changed. So there is that idea, but the problem is that half the time, as Carla and I were just saying inside, arts are not at the table. Artists are not at the table. So if you want arts to make a difference, but if you're not even at the table, how are you going to make a difference? So the big thing for us is to make sure that we are at the table, whether it's about policy, whether it's about law change, whether it's about social change, we need to be at the table.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. You know, I think one of the challenges here, particularly in a global environment, is that there are many different idioms, and that culture to culture, there's a challenge in communicating. Humor doesn't always translate. The issues don't always translate. How does one tackle that? How does one tackle it?
It is difficult because you can speak the language very well, but in the same time, your humor will not translate. I think humor is the third language. You can speak, you can be a perfect linguistic, but you not understand the humor from Friends, and you understand Friends, you don't understand Frasier, which I think Frasier is a much higher level at Friends. And
we can have a debate about that later on.
And I think political satire is even higher because you need to understand the references, you need to understand the culture, you need to understand so many things in order to have your joke landing. However, to put what you said just in practical context, right now I live in the United States, and you know all of these problems of xenophobia, Islamophobia. There are people from the Muslim minorities who have been born there, and now they are using the humor of the culture, of the society that have been grown up into, to break up the stereotypes that have been constructed against Muslims and Arabs and Middle Easterns in the same way that people in this culture use humor. So you find a lot of like humorous sketches, satirical sketches, making fun of like how this society view minorities. And this has been a breakthrough because maybe the first generation of immigrants from the Middle East didn't have this tool. But people who come as a second generation are more skillful as using this tool. It's like, all right, you're calling me a terrorist? All right, I am a terrorist. Let me tell you what can I do as a terrorist. I blow myself 5 times a day trying to perfect my skill. And and even we try to actually even cross the lines. One of the, I did a show called The Democracy Handbook in the United States, where actually I went around America and I went into one of the most racist parts there. And one of them was a gun shop that actually had a sign called...
Wait. You went into a gun shop in a racist part of the United States?
That said Muslim-free zone gun shop. So like there are no Muslims around. And I went there and I interviewed the gun shop owner for more than an hour and a half. He didn't know that I was a Muslim. He told me, what you are? It's like, oh, well, I'm half Italian. He didn't ask the other half. And, and the thing is, I didn't go there to challenge him. I didn't go there to put him in his place. I didn't go there to pick up a fight. I just used humor in order to let him overflow of his lovely racist ideas. And it just like, on what satire does, it just puts a mirror in front of society. When people get offended by satire, they're not really offended at me. They're offended at themselves. Because they look at the mirror, they see themselves, they don't like what they see. And they're really upset of what they see. So it's really not my fault. I just put the mirror. And this is why it is very, as you said, it is very difficult to translate humor. But when it does, it goes a long way. And it really helps to bring culture together. Instead of like looking at Arabs, oh, you don't laugh. Yeah, we have like a very resting, grim face, but we do. Yes, we do. I mean, maybe we choose to do what you think that Arabs do best, you know, sit there quietly looking suspicious, basically giving you a reason to see something, say something. So basically helping you. But, and we joke about that. And when people hear about this, they actually feel quite embarrassed of how, and when they ask the question, they actually feel how little they know. And by the way, this goes both ways. This is not to say at all that Western societies or American societies or European societies are ignorant or know very little about our culture. We also know very little about their culture. Right. I mean, when you want to compare apples with apples. You don't want to compare like a taxi driver in America who listened to InfoWars with someone in the Middle East who's a professor. You need to compare. I think the same kind of knowledge and ignorance are found equally on all levels of society on both sides. And this is why humor gets the societies much closer.
Later you're going to say this panel was too short, but it's because they keep applauding everything you're saying, and there's just not enough time to talk.
It's their fault.
It's their fault.
Your fault.
It's all
their fault,
Thank you.
We can upload for the next 10 minutes and we're done with it.
David, can I ask him?
In one moment. I'm going to turn to the crowd here in a second.
Did you tell him finally?
Well, oh, okay, I'll come to you in a second. How did that happen? There's like 7 hands go up and they're all pointing at you. That's teamwork. Thank you. Very brief question. We've just got a couple of moments, but there's a theme here. I
asked him whether he finally told the gun shop guy who he was.
No, he
knew. He said no.
He knew after the video was out.
Okay.
Well, but you know, there's a common theme here.
Yeah.
The theme is that in order to persuade somebody, you have to connect to somebody, and that the best way to break down barriers is to humanize. Whether you humanize through humor or you humanize, through the vernacular language about women, and you start to touch them.
Well, I think one of the things we should remember is that arts are the only things that both are off a place, they have specificity, and they transcend. Nothing else does that. That's why you need the arts at the table.
Yeah, I believe that. Okay, now that's sarcastic applause.
Yes.
Oh, you don't.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
Don't say that. Don't say that. Passimo will work on you later. You're a medical doctor, right?
I was a heart surgeon
Heart
before
surgeon.
turning into science.
Right. So is there a
Which
cure?
is the biggest joke here, yes.
Yeah. Is that a joke? Do your patients agree? All right. Well, go ahead.
My name is Sarah. I'm a conductor. And I really resonate with what you're saying here. The question I have is exactly on this topic. How do we persuade the politicians, the policymakers, the leaders to create a space at the table for us and engage in that dialogue so that we do have gender equality, so that we do have education, arts, creativity, and preservation. Who are the people who makes that possible? Are they here? How do we go back to them and bring our case?
Thank you, Sarah. Penmela, how was your work responded to? I mean, your work was literally going up on the walls of a favela. How was it responded to by, you know, the authorities? How did you create a space? How do you work with them now? Because you have a foundation that does it. How do you work with them to ensure you've got a space at the table?
You know that in Brazil we have a problem that sometimes the law just don't work, and we have to make the laws work. And this is why the law on a paper sometimes is not so important. I believe that the important thing is to change the culture, to change the way people see the other person. In my case, the woman. And what I do is this. I go to people by people, and we talk, and we reorganize this idea about women and how they see themselves in the society.
Okay. Do we have other questions here? Do you want to say something while we're looking for them?
I just was going to say that I think one of the things I find, having run the Asian Society, where we had both arts and culture on the one hand and policy on the other and education on the third, is that I think oftentimes we're too siloed in our professions. We also have to make a real effort to be where others are and learn the language of what they're talking about so that it isn't just about how they can come to us, but we also have to do that work. And I think some of it has to do with the fact of this sort of logic versus creativity. And how does creative intelligence matter in this arena? And I found that doing it side by side and creating opportunities is really important.
Okay, very quick question, quick answers, and then we're going to have to wrap this up, I regret. Go on.
My name is Reem. I come from Egypt. And I have a comment, not a question.
A brief comment.
Very brief, yes. Now I'm working here in Abu Dhabi, but when I was in Egypt, I used to organize a public space festival in the streets during the uprising, during the revolution. That now this festival is taken to Tunisia. And there was no system in place where I could go and say, please give me permission to do the festival here or on this beach or under this bridge. But what I had to do was enforcing this. I used to knock doors and lead by example. And now, after I left, there is a system in place where, not a very organized system, but there are other people who could follow the example, and now they are doing some activities in public spaces. So what I wanted to say is that we don't have to convince the politicians, but we can be the example and encourage other people to follow us.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to drop this on you. Sorry. All right. But look, this has been a great discussion. It is a discussion that all of us know that will never stop. This is something that goes on and on and on. And we have great people here who you should interact with during the break. But you also have some other opportunities during this next 15-minute break. I don't know, Mohammed, if you know what Saif did last night. I heard. You're right, yeah, right. So Saif last night spontaneously said that he was going to bring tailors over here so that the men and women here could buy local costumes. And so when you go out, there will be a little table and you can sign up, and there will be tailors here, and you can satisfy your desire to look as elegant as Mohammed does at all times. He always looks elegant. So you can do that. You can have a snack. You can take a break. And in 15 minutes, we'll be back here. And I got to tell you, the next bit of art you're going to see is mind-blowing and wonderful. So please come back precisely in 14 and a half minutes. All right? See you soon. Thank you, everybody.